But that's not the reason why I've been fighting so hard to make sure that the Barry and Honey Sherman story actually is told from the perspective which matters, which is the video suspect. Without that piece of key evidence, Barry and Honey Sherman will never get solved. That case will never get solved, right? I wasn't trying to go to the news media and say, "Hey, I am the objective truth. I know everything." But I just find it so absurd that these people are going to call themselves news journalists when they don't go over basic information, right? The fact that the Barry and Honey Sherman case was botched from the very beginning, and the only piece of evidence they have was a video footage that a member of the public has already stated that they believe that they were in, right? So that testimony should outweigh or trump anyone else's experience because they don't have experience being there. No one has thus claimed that they were the video suspect. No one has come forward other than myself. So, you know what? If that doesn't give me legitimacy in their minds, me legitimacy over the Toronto police, okay, fine. But I also think the Toronto police are corrupt, and I think the news media is aiding their corruption. I think there's an interlocking problem of corruption, right? The judicial system aids police corruption. The judicial system allows police to murder, rape, rob, and steal. The incarceration system allows police officers to kill minorities or brutalize minorities so that it becomes the norm, so that certain people in society are demonized, and then everyone turns their head like nothing's happening. It's just business as usual, right? There's an interlocking problem. There's compounding issues. So if you had a patient, right? Let's say you're a doctor, you have a patient. You know that patient would have issues if that person has arthritis and cancer, and they have mental illness, and they have high blood pressure. Like you could see that. You could basically see that, if a patient has multiple health issues, a compounding snowball effect could happen where this person's life is miserable. So how like we could obviously make that metaphor and we can broaden that metaphor to society. If the judicial system aids police corruption, if the incarceration system aids police corruption, if the news media, through their negligence and their silence, aids police corruption, rape, murder, assault, robbery, theft, bribery, obstruction of justice, then there's a compounding issue. We have multiple organizations, parts of infrastructure, government. It's an interlocking system of evil. So what is evil? Evil, and we're not just talking about, criminals. In society, we need to criminalize less. We need to give people a fighting chance. If you are on disability and you have a criminal history, that's a compounding issue. It's difficult for someone to turn back the clock and make better use of that time when all they have is time, right? But if we're not willing to tackle the problem of capitalism, which is absolutely inseparable from this problem, we still have to understand the judicial system, incarceration, policing, the media, people in government. It's an interlocking system because once we pull that thread, maybe we can undo all this corruption. But what is evil? Evil is not simply criminality. Evil is something that possesses you and you're unaware of your bad intentions. You're unaware of your ill will. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you're not aware of your choices, right? But what it does mean is that, say you're a passive observer, right? So many people in Toronto are just lulled by this constant work cycle, this never-ending, punishing exhaustion that is Toronto work life. People are lulled into that. Now, are these people evil? Well, I don't know, right? Their intentions seem good, but when you're a passive observer and you watch other people suffer, right, that seems to be a part of the larger societal evil. But then again, if we're willing to talk about the concept of evil, then what is the truth? The truth is the counter to that unconscious unawareness. And here's the thing about the media, right? The media claims that they have the full knowledge and the full truth about what's going on in society, right? But you know what I find so funny? You can go onto Reddit, go onto our Toronto on Reddit, and then there's a poster that frequently posts there, and he shows you multiple articles, dozens and dozens and dozens of articles every year about Toronto police corruption, right? And of course, news media outlets like CBC, CTV, CP24, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be saying that they have the full truth and they are the truth, and what they know is unquestionable because they're news journalists. But the funny thing is that if you truly believe that, then why wouldn't you aggregate all those articles that you've released? And why doesn't every journalist know at the back of their hand all of these trends in not only crime, but trends in police committing crime? Right? Just because a journalist from CBC or CTV News, just because they release an article on shootings, does that journalist, are they responsible for every article that's released from CBC? Are they responsible for all the journalistic integrity of every other journalist? Because, again, go back to Reddit. Go back to that user who posts all the Toronto police corruption articles. I'm pretty sure that person has a better understanding of crime in the city than some of these journalists, because I don't even think that these journalists have the time to aggregate through all these articles that were released and truly say, oh, no, we did an article on shootings, but we have the full picture of crime. I don't know. I don't believe that. I think that's garbage. Okay, and here's my example, right? Here's my example. So take Catherine McDonald. She's a reporter with CTV News. I actually spoke with her one day because there was a shooting in a neighborhood, and I was just walking by. And when I spoke to her, very nice lady. Nothing against her, but it's only endemic of what modern day journalism is. Because like so many other people, so many other news journalists all across the city of Toronto, for the last 3 years, I went up to people and I said, hey, guess what? I was misidentified as the Barry and Honey Sherman video suspect. They used the image of my likeness, and your news organization used my image of my likeness and posted it on the news. And of course, what was her response? Well, if I have time, I'll get to that. If I have time, I might address one of the biggest stories on the planet about two of the wealthiest billionaires in Canada who were murdered in their home, possibly by police. And you're standing right in front of the guy who was misidentified in the video that you released from your news, from your organization. So I just find it so strange, right? Here's modern day journalism. They have to write their own piece. They have to video record most times. They're working behind the camera. Then they have to edit the footage, and then they have to figure out how and to sequence it and release it on the news, within that 24-hour news cycle or whenever they have to release it. So essentially, these news journalists are basically taking my job as someone who wanted to get into video production, or editing or whatever. And these corporations are forcing these journalists to be so overworked, they can't even report the news. They can't even understand what's going on in the city, right? Ask Catherine McDonald. Again, nothing against her. She seems like a very nice lady. But you're doing all this reporting on shootings and crime in the city. You're the go-to person, right? Okay, well, why don't you talk to Hank Insignia? He suddenly mysteriously quit his job from policing to go to Global News as some sort of media source. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why don't you, Catherine McDonald, ask former homicide detective Hank Insignia why he said that the serial killer Bruce McArthur had a partner? Why don't you ask him, hey, look, is there a serial killer partner still on the loose in Toronto that we don't know about? Oh, Catherine McDonald, why don't you ask Hank Insignia, right, about his crime approval rate, right? The Toronto police said that they had like an 85% crime solving rate. What do the Toronto police do? They go bully our mayor, Olivia Chow. They bully her into like non-existence because obviously she can't fight back or do anything in City Hall, and it affects it affects the budget. So the police have a over $1 billion budget that just got approved again for another increase. City council members, our mayor Olivia Chow, they got bullied, and what do? What do they say this year? A couple months after Hank Insignia, homicide detective, bows out for a weird reason out of Toronto police. What happened to your 85% crime clearance rate? Why do you need a new guns and gangs unit? Why do you need a new tow trucking unit? Why? Because you're incompetent? Because you're not solving any crimes? So then how are you reducing crime in the city? I don't understand, right? It's just such a basic question that these supposed news journalists should ask. It's so basic. Like, the information is right in front of you, and you have a choice. You can either say, hey, we're going to report not only on trends in crime, but trends in police committing crime, because the Toronto police are a criminal organization, and they are the ones controlling the flow not only of crime, but of information. So it becomes a whole other issue, because we have someone like, Steve Ryan from CP24. The thing about Steve Ryan is he was a former cop. So if you go to any of these news stations, if you knock on their door, bang, 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 hello, CP24, City News, local news stations that should be the bastion of our democracy. When major corporations hold all the chips and all the cards or whatever, local news should be there to tell us, hey, you know what? Something weird is going on. Local members in our community who help us report the news, they're saying there's a problem. But that's not the local news we have, because those local news channels are, again, owned by a larger corporation like Bell Media, right? By Rogers and people like that. So now we understand the heart of the issue, because people like Steve Ryan, supposed journalist, what do you think he's saying? When you go knock on their door, go to CP24, City News, whoever, go to the Bell Media building and say, hey, there's people going missing in the city of Toronto. People like Raheem White. And when Tim Wilkie says his phone's being hacked and he can't reach out to the mother of Raheem White, and our Facebook conversation got deleted mysteriously, and I'm trying, not because I want attention. No, because I have the ability to understand there's a problem. Other citizens that should be able to go to these local news channels and knock on their door and say, hey, you know what? There's people going missing. There's some serious evil going on in the city, and we're concerned. Steve Ryan, he says, you know what? We don't play the police. We don't play the police. Well, you were a police officer. Do you just mean that the news media is knowingly aiding police corruption, murder, rape, bribery, assault, obstruction, all these crimes? Because you were a cop. You were a police officer. So when the Toronto police go around my neighborhood calling me a thought virus, why is that? Why are they so concerned with this sort of language? Thought virus. It's because people like Steve Ryan have probably infected the news media to not ask basic questions about the Toronto police conduct and misconduct. That's the heart of the issue. That's why police corruption is spreading to every other industry. That's why we have an interlocking problem of corruption that no one is willing to address, because no one understands that this problem is even bigger than capitalism. It's about the concept of evil. And of course, this is going to be a difficult topic for me, obviously, right? Because for the last 12 years of my life, I've been very isolated. I've been very alone. And, maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's just the life I need to live. I don't know. But I've been very angry at society. Been very angry, and I've been just trying to make right. I've just been trying to do good. And that's the issue. So, what you see here is I'm chained to the Bell Media building. For 3 years, the news media has shut me out, and they've said, you're crazy. You are crazy, therefore you're stupid. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm stupid enough to chain myself to the Bell Media building because I'm trying to make good on something. I don't think two billionaires should be murdered by police. I don't think this information should be kept from the public, and I don't think the Sherman family is necessarily in danger. I think the Toronto police are just covering up for their corruption. Now, why this is so difficult for me to talk about is because I think people should get a second chance. I think that if you get charged with a crime, if you have to do 5 years in jail, that is going to be a massive impact on your life. If you have a health problem, it's a compounding issue that snowballs into a chaos that nobody wants to deal with, right? The reason I go to the media is the same reason why I'd be going to the government and asking the government for help. Please, can you understand the issue of people's psychology? People are complicated. Life is very complicated. That's why I feel so, I feel just so, I don't know, I just feel weird about this whole situation because I'm going to be telling people to forgive. Forgive people. Let people live their lives. Let people do good. If you weaponize people's psychology, that's policing. But if you weaponize goodness, the ability to do good things and to be a good person, right? Because all the news media is going to do, likely, if my story breaks, they're going to treat me like I'm a monster because I'm this angry, bitter, spiteful person. They don't hear me being articulate like this. They don't hear me behind the microphone because they didn't bring me in for interview. All that police violence that I had to endure, the last 3 years especially, anytime that I was assaulted or brutalized by the Toronto police, they have to hold some sort of accountability because my life would have been radically different. Not just 3 years ago when I was trying to expose the Sherman case, but how about when I was a child, right? When I had to go through what I had to go through at these psych wards, at the KGH and at the Hotel Dieu Hospital. It was a big story, and my story was never really a part of that. I was never really in the news cycle because of that. I've been through a lot of stuff. I've made a lot of poor decisions, and my life is so shitty right now, I'm probably going to make a lot of irrational, stupid decisions, and I don't want to do that. I want people in my life again. I want to have friends. I want to feel healthy and safe. I don't feel like that. So, with all these police following me around, people following me, they got their phones out, they're pointing, they walk with their phone in their hand. They're trying to be slick, like they're not recording me or trying to get an audio bite on me. That's fine. They can say whatever about me, but I'm posting this video just so you know. I've been trying to be a good person. When things have happened in my community, I've tried to go to the local news because I know I can fucking make a difference. I know for a fact because I know what's going on, and if they do as well, then I don't think they're being genuine. I think they're misrepresenting, and their silence is negligence, right? People laugh, silence is violence. In the case of the news, it absolutely is, right? Epistemology might be a very big word, but if you don't know epistemology, what that word boils down to is you are responsible for what you know. Knowledge is both a tool and a weapon. And you, the news media, are responsible for that violence when you don't report something. It's not just about misinformation. It's about disinformation that the news is willing to say. If the news, thinks that they're the ultimate truth, do they know the ultimate truth about me? Do they know my psychology? Do they even bother to interview me when I chain myself to the Bell Media building? Right? Think about their intentions. CP24 is moving out of Toronto, likely because they know that the Middle East war is going to just explode. They know the Middle East war is just going to completely devour that region, and they don't want to report about it in the local Toronto news. They're moving to Scarborough because they know that they can expand the policing powers there. They know that they can demonize those people of color in Scarborough, and that's what it's about, right? Back when there was much music and, there was a cultural hub for local news. We don't have that anymore. And just like CTV News, CBC, guarantee you they're going to go through a whole another round of firing of journalists as corporate control becomes more dominant. But I think even the politicians are getting a little annoyed, and they should. Because Polite Canadian culture is silencing people. I'm going to be able to release this video today. I'll just be straight up because I'm not a black person. I'm not a black person of color that was murdered for challenging the police. For the last 3 years, I've been challenging the police on their lies about me, right? And I've been doing so because, of course, I'm not a perfect person. I'm an imperfect person. But I also know that whatever mistake I made in life, there's plenty of people who made those same mistakes and they're not here anymore. They're dead. They don't get to tell their story. That's my issue. So the news absolutely has a responsibility. So you can hear it first from me. You can hear it first from me right now, right here. Okay, the news is becoming a problem, police corruption is becoming a problem, and political power is becoming a problem. The reason why this polite Canadian culture sickens me, the reason why I've always hated it, is because it always seemed like there was state-run media, right? We can laugh about how China is an ethno-state and they have state-run media, but this polite, soft political talk, that all goes away when the political drama and the infighting happens, right? It's meaningless. It's just to control people, and we know that now. To me, Canadian media has always been state-run media because of this political politeness correctness. If you don't want to deal with people's issues, their mental issues, or even their political issues, their very existences, then you are committing violence. It doesn't matter. It's not a one-way thing. And just look, that's what I'm going to wrap up, and that's what I want to say. Thank you so much, and have a great day.